Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
That being said, let me tell you about our guest who is returning to the Just Bernard Show, I believe for the second time. Excuse me. Garnet Schulhauser is an author. He is also very lucky to be in contact with an out-of-body spirit guide that takes him on astral journeys. And we were introduced to Albert during his last visit here on the show. Garnet has written and released a third book on his experiences called Dance of Heavenly Bliss, Divine Inspiration for Humanity. And we're going to hear more about that now. Welcome back to the show, Garnet. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Bernard. It's a pleasure for me to be on your show. This is the second time, and I know I'm going to enjoy every minute of it.
Yes, and so are we. Thank you very much. So, Garnet, let's start off by reminding people a little bit about, well, first of all, the surprise you had when meeting Alex. You basically were an attorney, correct?
Yeah, I was. I was practicing law, and it was back in 2007, Bernard.
Yes.
And I was strolling down the street a sunny afternoon in May, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a homeless man jumped out in front of me and stopped me in my tracks. And he looked like a typical homeless man, except he had these very dazzling, sparkling blue eyes that were penetrating deep within me and also sending me a wave of pure, unconditional love that infused my whole body with an amazing sense of peace and security. So it turned out that he was a very special man. We ended up eventually sitting on a bench together and having a dialogue that went off and on for several months. And he revealed early on his name was Albert, and that he was one of my spirit guides in disguise. And he had come, manifested himself in physical form for me only, just for my eyes, so that he could answer my questions and help me on my journey. And so he answered all the big questions in life, like who am I, why am I here, what's my life's purpose, and what happens to me when I die. And all of those revelations, and plus many more, I included in my first book, which he asked me to write. He asked me to write a book about his revelations, and that resulted in my very first book, Dancing on a Stamp. And then he disappeared out of my life for a few weeks and then came back again in a very different form. This time, I woke up one night in my bedroom and I saw a ghost-like figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. When it moved closer to me, Bernard, I could see it was my old friend Albert, except he was in astral form. And so I said to him, what brings you here this time, Albert? He said, I'm here to take you on a series of out-of-body trips, astral adventures. I'm going to take you to the spirit side, other places on our planet, other places in the universe, because I want you to write about what you hear and see in your second book, because he believed a picture was worth 1,000 words. So then he literally reached out, grabbed my astral hand, pulled my astral body out of my physical body, and I followed him up through the ceiling, up to the clouds, and we hovered above a beautiful high spot above our beautiful planet. And then eventually he led me into the spirit side through a shimmering doorway. So that was my first set of astral trips with him. And that resulted in my second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, which you and I discussed on our very first show, Bernard. Yeah. And then as I was finishing the manuscript for my second book, he disappeared again for a few weeks, then came back into my life again, this time in a similar pattern as an astral figure, suddenly appearing in my bedroom one night. And he said, come on, I have another set of trips for you to experience. I'm going to take you to different places to meet different people. And I want you to write about what you see and hear in your third book. And that resulted in my third book, Dance of Heavenly Bliss, which was just released in March.
Wow.
So that's the history of my meeting with Albert.
That's amazing, and congratulations, by the way, on the release of your third book. Um, Garnet, of course, and I'm sure many people listening are maybe might be skeptical or whatnot, and I can only imagine your skepticism. I guess coming from a fairly conservative mindset, perhaps, and what did it take for you to embrace this side of reality from coming from your background?
Well, you're very right. As a lawyer, I have a very analytical and oftentimes skeptical mind. And so in my first meeting, when he first showed up in my life, and I said to him, why did you stop me? And he said, well, I'm here to answer your questions and help you on your journey. I said to him, with my skeptical lawyer mind kicking in, I said, why do you think you can help me? Because you can't even help yourself. You've been sleeping on the street for weeks and you smell like a dead fish. And he said, well, looks can be deceiving. He says, you can go back and to your office and see if you can find the answers you've been seeking on all those emails waiting for you on a computer, or you can sit and have a chat with me. So very fortunate for me, my intuition kicked in, and I said, well, what do I have to lose? I didn't typically consort with homeless people or have conversations with them, but I thought this guy was different. And so I sat down and I had a conversation with him, which as I said, went on for several months. And so my skepticism quickly, evaporated once I started talking to this man, Bernard, because I could tell he was a very wise, compassionate soul who was really speaking the truth, and he certainly won me over very quickly as we began our conversation. And I had no doubt since then that what he's told me is the very real truth.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there comes a point when you can start. We begin to listen with our heart, I guess is a good way of saying it, and we realize that truth is truth, and we begin to embrace that there is something greater out there. Is that fair to say for you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And he clearly opened my eyes to that. And my meeting with him was clearly life transformational, because before I had been a very conservative, button-down lawyer. After I met him, it sort of I knew I had to change my path and go in a different direction, which I did by beginning to write my books and continuing in my relationship with Albert. And so it's been a very much of a big change for me, but a very good change in my
Yeah.
view.
Oh, yes. And I'm sure a good chance for everybody that gets to read your books as well. This information is very important for all of us to be reading, whether it comes from you or for anybody else that's in touch with the spiritual side. These messages are not only universal, but I believe they're very urgent for humanity. And is that fair to say that in your third book, the urgency of the message comes across? What is the difference between the second book message and the third book message?
Well, the third book sort of carries on with the message from the second book and sort of emphasizes it in different ways. And the message really, which I got from the Council of Wise Ones in my second book and then reiterated in the third book, was that, look at humans, you're at a very crucial crossroads in your development. You have very advanced technology, but your emotional and spiritual intelligence has not kept pace. So that means that all too often, too many humans let their negative emotions like anger, fear, hate, greed rule their lives, and that results in a lot of violence, like in the murders and terrorist acts and genocide, wars and other conflicts, which makes our planet oftentimes a very unpleasant place to live. And their message was, we really have to change our ways. We have to stop abusing other humans, abusing the animals on our planet that share our planet, and stop polluting Mother Earth before it goes badly for us. Because there have been other civilizations in Earth's past that have risen up to very great heights, like Atlantis and Lemuria, and they ended up crashing and burning and destroying themselves. And they didn't want our civilization to have the same result. So they said we really have to focus on changing our ways, embracing love and compassion, and stifling our negative emotions so that we can raise our vibrations and live a better life on our planet. And if we can do that, our planet will be a much happier place to live. So the third book kind of reinforces that first message I got from the Council of Wise Ones, and adds, embellishes it, and gives us new examples of what's going on Earth and the things that we need to stop. For example, we're very abusive of animals, and one of the visits that Albert took me to was to an aquarium in California, where I had a conversation, and this is part of my astral traveling, of course. I'm an astral form. I had a telepathic conversation with a killer whale, an orca, in California, who was in a water park. And this killer whale, I found out, was a very wise, intelligent, sensitive creature whose intelligence, in many ways, was equal to or greater than humans in a lot of aspects. And she says that their race is their only desire is to roam freely in the oceans and live in harmony with Mother Earth and all the other animals, including humans. And she was very dismayed at the way humans had been abusing her and her kin and her cousins over the centuries, by catching, by hunting down whales in whaling ships and catching them in traps and then catching them out in the ocean and putting them in concrete prisons and water parks where they were forced to perform silly tricks for the spectators who didn't seem to care anything about their plight. And she says, we don't know why humans do this. We try to communicate telepathically with humans, but most of them do not hear us. They're too busy with their lives and they don't hear our messages. And we really want to live in peace and harmony. And she said, please take a message back to your fellow humans that whales and dolphins and all the other animals on Earth are not put there to be abused by humans. They have their own rightful place on our planet, and humans should respect that. So it was a very heart-rending sort of message from this lovely creature who was very sensitive, very intelligent, and clearly had feelings just like humans do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And well, I don't know if your connection with this being came before or after the announcement that I believe it was the SeaWorld is going to stop all whale shows, it's a step in the right direction, but we have a long way to go when it comes to having compassion and respect for our fellow animal kingdom, for sure. Um, so, Garnet, the question that comes to mind to me. Oh, you were speaking about the Council of Wise Ones. How did you meet them? Who makes up the Council of Wise Ones that you visited?
Well, the Council of Wise Ones is a committee of very advanced souls. They exist on the spirit side, and their job is to oversee all the incarnations on planet Earth. And so I had a couple of visits with them. The first time was in my, I describe in Dancing Forever with Spirit, and I met with them again as described in my third book. And I had a interesting message from the chair of this committee, whose name is Sophia, and she basically said, that their job is to try to oversee what's going on planet Earth, and they were very dismayed, as I mentioned earlier, with what's happening on Earth with the human civilization and how we were abusing the planet and abusing other animals and abusing ourselves as well. And she really she really wanted me to put the message out there that we really need to stop the abuse and change our ways. And she I'm not sure who composed the council originally. She said that she was recruited when there was a vacancy on the committee a while back, and she was recruited by the other members of the committee. And so she was quite happy in that role, and they play quite a significant role because they help advise people who are going to incarnate on their planet. They check out their life plans, give them advice as to whether their life plans make sense or are conducive to the goals for that particular soul. So they have a very significant major role in terms of people who incarnate on our planet. And so they're it's quite an amazing group, and I hope to see them again sometime. But they're very much very important part of the cycle of life on Earth.
Yeah, I would say so. And we hear so much about, and I'm wondering what your take is on this. We hear so much about, well, in the Native American, we have the Great Brotherhood, the Council of the Great Spirit Brotherhood. I was lucky enough to connect with a group that called themselves the Emissaries of Light. You've connected with a group that call themselves the Council of Wise Ones. And we have many other people who have been very lucky to make a connection astrally or energetically with these types of councils. Do you feel that there are perhaps transdimensional and or spiritual beings, enlightened beings, or did they give you any clarity about all the other councils that we all are meeting at this time? There just seems to be so many that we're meeting.
Yeah, no, they didn't mention the other councils, and I don't know if the other councils are really the same one under a different name.
That's
I don't
what
know
I'm
that. I
feeling.
didn't get into that. I expect, Bernard, that there may be some truth to that. All I know is that they described themselves as Council of Wise Ones, and that was their function. So it may be that there's only one council but goes under different names depending on who's asking the question.
Yes, yes, very interesting. And as well, to get it even more abstract, I can't help but feel, I wonder if they come under different, I don't want to say soul groups, but planetary groups. Maybe they help different galactic areas or whatnot. When I met with the emissaries of light, they addressed, or I guess they describe themselves as Arcturian Council. So I wonder if that's a difference, perhaps galactically speaking.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there because but my indication is that there is a council of wise ones or some similar body for all the planets that have life in our universe, and so there's a number of
Aha.
different councils that perform the same function, but each one is sort of dedicated to one or more specific planets because they have the experience of incarnations in life forms on those planets, so they've gained a lot of wisdom from their previous lives, and they're able to advise other people about incarnations going forward. So yeah, I think there certainly is more than one such body. It depends on which planet you're talking to.
Yeah.
This council was the ones that oversaw the incarnations on our planet.
Yeah. And I can't help but feel they're all concerned about Earth. And all the messages I got were for Earth as well. And I feel some of these other councils are getting, there's something very special about Earth that we are not picking up on in the galactic scheme of things, I feel, as human beings. And were you akin to any of that? What makes Earth so special? Did they say anything about that?
They didn't say anything, but I detected from the urgency when I spoke to them was that they really felt it's important for Earth and human civilization on Earth to get over this bad patch that they're going through and not have our human civilization destroy all life on our planet or destroy our planet, because we certainly have capability of doing that for the most part. They didn't really get into the reasons behind that, but I detected their urgency. And in fact, they said that lately, over the last 30 years, they've been recruiting a lot of very advanced souls to incarnate on Earth as humans to help the cause, because these souls would be very wise and advanced souls who could spread the message that's coming from Spirit. And they also said that they've been bombarding humans, our planet, with messages from Spirit, which basically is the one they gave to me, was that we have to change our ways and embrace love and compassion. And they've been sending that through many, many channels all over the world, like through me and my books, and you, Bernard, and your radio show, and all the other radio hosts and authors throughout the world. So there's been a real blast of messages coming out. And that, I think I detect that is because of their sense of urgency that we need to do something in a hurry before it's too late.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more at all. I couldn't agree with you more, Garnet. One of the chapters in your book is Gaia speaks. Now, did you have the ability to speak to the Gaia spirit?
Absolutely. And this happened when Albert took me, again, traveling in astral form. He took me to a cavern under the North Pole. And there I got a chance to have a conversation with Gaia, which is the consciousness of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
And that surprised me a bit, because before this meeting, I thought that our planet was just a conglomerate of inert molecules, forming rocks and mountains and oceans and deserts and so on. But our planet has a consciousness. And Gaia she was a very wise, compassionate, dedicated soul who's really, really wanted to have everything, in Mother Earth, all the animals and plants, including humans, to live in peace and harmony. And she wanted to protect her ecosystem so it would be nicely balanced the way it was intended, with nothing out of whack. And she expressed dismay to me about the way humans had been abusing Mother Earth with their pollution over the years. And she said way back when, before the Industrial Revolution, we didn't cause a lot of harm to Mother Earth. But after the Industrial Revolution, we've been very capable at polluting her waters, her soil, her atmosphere with our pollution. And she was quite dismayed at this. And she was also dismayed at the way we treat her other animals with our abuse, with hunting and killing, and all the other things that we do to the animals that we share our planet with. And so her message was, please, humans, I want you to live in peace and harmony, on Mother Earth. I'm not vindictive towards you at all, but I'm really upset at the way you've been dominating the whole planet in the way you have been with your violence and aggression. And she really wanted us to change our ways. And she says that if we don't change our ways, it could end up badly for us, because our pollution will come back to haunt us. And she said, which is surprising, she says she has the power to actually fight back, Bernard. She says that she can increase the number and intensity of natural disasters on our planet, like earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, droughts, and so on. And she's been doing a bit of that because she wants to shoot a warning shot across our bow to wake us up, make us realize if we continue on the same path we have been, it's going to end badly for us. And so she really hoped we could change our ways, and she wanted me to know that and to put that message in my book so others would be aware of it.
And it is very true. There have been a lot of earth changes, both, quite profound earth changes, especially if we talk about the Ring of Fire around the Pacific Rim, all the volcanoes and earthquakes that are happening there. And we always make, I know amongst my peers, we make that, how should I say, analogy that Mother Earth is, she's not fighting back, but she's stretching her bones to let us know that she needs a little break, a little massage, so to speak, and that does cause natural disasters. Unfortunately, we need to remain in balance with the ecosystem and be a part of the ecosystem versus working against it. And you're absolutely right. Since the Industrial Revolution, between the petroleum being extracted and all of the artificial chemicals that have been released on the planet, I can see where she's, getting ready, shooting some, like you said, shots across our bow. We have about 1 minute left before the break here, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you could, ever so quickly, to tell our friends where they can find your new book, Dance of Heavenly Bliss.
Well, the best source of information, Bernard, about that book and my other two books is my website, which is garnetschulhauser.com, which is hard to remember. So if anybody Googles Dancing on a Stamp or Dance of Heavenly Bliss, you can get to my website. And there's information about all my books. You can download a free excerpt. You can watch a book video, and you can. There's buy links that I've listed there to all the popular online stores like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and a number of other ones. So if you click on any of those sites, it gets you right to a place where you can buy one or all of my books. So there's a lot of information on my website. There's also icons that'll lead you to my social media sites like Facebook and YouTube and Google Plus and Twitter and so on. So you can follow all the information about what's happening in my life and when my other books are going to be published.
Great, wonderful, wonderful. And like I said, we should be coming to a commercial break in just a few seconds. I just want to remind everybody that next week, I'm very happy, we are going to be having the Crystal Crone. Speaking of aligning with natural energy, I call her the Queen of Crystals, and she will be on the show next week talking to us about how we can align and connect and do work with these amazing,
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the justBernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world, so please remember to keep supporting us. Just make a small donation, if you can, at freedomslips.com. And welcome back to the show, Garnet Schulhauser. I'm coming up with the intriguing questions in your book. I've found you have wonderful experiences with, I guess, for lack of a better term, things that people might find intriguing or how shall I say, controversial meetings and whatnot. And what I'd first like to ask you, though, is in one of the chapters of your book, you're speaking of heaven on earth, Eden on earth, and how we lost that, and how you were able to see a civilization, I guess, at its highest. And the reason why I bring this up, I find it so intriguing, is we recently, last week actually, we had Brian Forster, who is an alternative archaeologist, and he too is pushing the theory that we did have greater civilization that might have had technology far greater than what we have now. Were you able to see any of this? Were you told anything about these civilizations?
Yeah, in two cases. One was that I got to view a very advanced civilization that actually had lived on an island in the South Atlantic, and they haven't been discovered by archaeologists, but they advanced to a very high stage of development, higher than what we are right now. And what happened was that they decided to try to develop a warp drive so they could travel to the stars. And somehow things kind of got out of control. And when they try to implement this warp drive, it sort of ended up causing a lot of explosions, and it basically destroyed their civilization. And their island sort of crumbled and sunk down into the Atlantic. And so that was a case of where technology basically got out of control, or at least in the hands of a few of their people, and it destroyed their civilization. So that's one that the archaeologists have not found yet. Of course, we all know about Atlantis and Lemuria. I didn't get to see any of those scenes, but I did see this other one, which was in the South Atlantic. But then another interesting civilization I found, which it was a human civilization which wasn't advanced technologically, but it advanced very much in a sociological sense. And this was a civilization that lived among the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. And of course, archaeologists and anthropologists say that humans haven't been around that long, but they were there. I saw that in the Akashic records. It was a human civilization that lived very close to nature. They were very peaceful. They didn't have any crime or violence. Men and women shared everything equally. They shared the cooking, cleaning, child rearing, hunting duties, and they lived very close to nature. They didn't abuse Mother Nature, didn't abuse the other planets that lived, the other animals that lived on our planet, and so it was a very interesting civilization. They actually, I watched as a hunting party composed of half men and half women actually went on a hunting foray to hunt down a Hadrosaurus, which was one of the dinosaurs way back then, which they used for food, and they took it back and they lived in walled cities to protect themselves from marauding Tyrannosaurus rexes and some of the other carnivores. And so it was a very interesting civilization, very idyllic in many senses. But what happened was they disappeared. The civilization was destroyed, not through any fault of their own. But when the asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, it kicked up a bunch of dust and smoke and other things and triggered volcanoes all over the world. The end result was like a nuclear winter for about 3 years, which ended up killing most of the dinosaurs. And that human civilization was buried under a couple hundred meters of lava from a nearby volcano. So that's why nobody's discovered them yet, but they clearly did live that long ago, and that was just another example of a human civilization that was thriving on our planet and ended up being destroyed. In this case, it wasn't through any fault of their own. So Albert says there's been a number of human civilizations over the ages that have risen up to great heights and then end up crashing and burning, and he used that as sort of a warning to us, as I mentioned, that our civilization now is at a very advanced stage too, and they really don't want history to repeat itself. They want us to sort of pull through this one and move on to the next stage.
And do you feel that he's saying that, and I believe you might have touched on it at the very beginning of our discussion, how technology is advancing so quickly that perhaps our emotional and spiritual evolution is not keeping up with that advanced technology that we're discovering?
That's exactly right, and that's part of the problem. Is that if our emotional and spiritual intelligence was keeping pace, there wouldn't be any danger of us unleashing weapons of mass destruction against each other, and we have the potential to destroy all the life on our planet. But because it hasn't kept pace, then there's still too many negative emotions running amok on our planet, oftentimes in the wrong hands of people who have a lot of power, and that results in all the wars and conflicts and terrorist acts and so on. And so they're really concerned that somebody with their finger on the trigger to weapons of mass destruction doesn't sort of unleash those before we have a chance to sort of catch up in terms of emotional and spiritual advancement.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And moving on a little bit about some more of the subject matter, which I'm going to be using the word intrigue because the chapter I'm thinking of right now is Vatican intrigue, and that's a very interesting experience for you. Can you share a little bit about your visit to I guess it was what was it, Pope Paul?
Pope John Paul the First.
John Paul the First. That's right.
Yeah, and you see, I recall way back. This was in the 70s, and I recall just before I met Albert that Pope John Paul the First was elected Pope, and then he died in mysterious circumstances about 33 days after his election.
Yep.
And it was very, very mysterious because he died and they didn't perform an autopsy, and the Vatican officials sort of quickly buried him, and there was no inquiry as to how he died, or anything about it. So it was very suspicious, and people have been suspicious of that death, ever since. And so Albert took me to visit the soul of the guy who was Pope John Paul I, in the Vatican, and he said, basically, he said, hey, I was murdered, I was poisoned. He said I was poisoned by people in the Vatican who were very concerned about my what they called radical views after I was elected pope. And what he said was that he was very he basically told everyone that it was his goal to change some of the outdated policies of the Catholic Church. Namely, the primary one was the prohibition on artificial birth control. And he thought this was an outdated, antiquated policy that made no sense, and that the church really had to get into the 20th century and change all that. And that scared the heck out of a lot of the cardinals and the officials in the Vatican, because they just could not foresee that policy change because it's been around for so long. And so they decided that they had to take matters into their own hands. Before he had a chance to implement his change in policy, they basically hired somebody to poison him. So that's how he died. He was murdered, and they quickly, of course, covered it up. They did not want an autopsy because it would disclose that he was poisoned, and they just quickly brushed it under the carpet and elected a new pope. And so he says that's what happened to me, and it wasn't a natural death. I was murdered. And I said, well, do you know who the people are who orchestrated this? And he says, yeah, I do. I've since had a reconciliation with them here on the spirit side, but I'm not going to tell you because it won't serve any useful purpose. So that was kind of a very intriguing, solves one of the mysteries that some Catholics have had in their minds ever since that happened back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, and I was one of them. I could not believe how quickly they handled that and just covered it up. And again, if we're as we're on the trail of Vatican history and religious history, there in today's world, for those of us that are not necessarily metaphysically educated and or spiritually educated, those who have come into the belief of the concept, which I believe is a church-created concept of Satan, versus the archangel Lucifer, and how they've brought them together. You seem to have had an interaction with this archangel Lucifer, and he did explain a little bit of what I just mentioned to you. Can you share some of that with us? I'm sure many of our listeners would find that very intriguing.
Yeah, well, I was on the spirit side, and Albert said to me at one point, he says, I'm going to take you for your next meeting to meet Lucifer. And I said, Albert, well, I'm surprised because you had told me before that Satan did not exist. It was just an invention of the church. And he says, well, come, there is Lucifer. I'll come and I'll introduce you to him. So there I went, and Lucifer was a very handsome, compassionate, wise angel. And he said, yes, I've been badly maligned over the years. People have basically thought me to be the devil, Satan, one of God's fallen angels, the personification of all evil. But that's very untrue. He says, first of all, Satan or the devil does not exist. It was an invention of the church. And he said, and in my case, he says, I'm not an evil spirit. I'm a very beneficent angel. I'm there to help the source deal with the incarnations and the problems on our planet Earth. And he said, to the contrary, rather than being someone who instigates evil, I'm actually there to try to discourage humans from creating and carrying out evil. And he says he's been working hard behind the scenes over the centuries to try to, through intuitive flashes, telepathic messages, and other means, to subtly convince people who are contemplating evil deeds to stop and rethink it and not go ahead with it. And he said he's been successful in a lot of cases, but a number of, because there's still so much evil on our planet. Obviously, his project doesn't work all the time, but he's nevertheless, he's tireless in terms of trying to make sure that he can curtail and stifle as much evil as he can. And he gave me 3 examples, which he said just what really surprised me, I guess. He said, I'll give you an example or 3 examples of what I did to curtail some evil that you would recognize on Earth. And he said in the first case, he said that he claimed to be instrumental in gently persuading Abraham Lincoln to abolish slavery back in the 19th century. And he said that during the Second World War, he exerted his influence to convince the Nazi scientists who were working on building the A bomb for Hitler to drag their feet so that the bomb would not be available for the Nazis to unleash during the Second World War. And then he said during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, and you may remember this, Bernard, he convinced Nikita Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time, convinced him to not, press the button to start World War III. And I remember that was back in 62. I was a young lad, and I remember everyone thought for a period of time there that World War III was imminent, because the Soviet Union and the United States were sort of in a Mexican standoff, and we didn't know who was going to pull the trigger or if anybody would. Anyway, Lucifer claimed that he persuaded Khrushchev to back off and not start World War III. So very interesting conversation. And it turns out that yes, he was badly maligned by people in the church, and that he is not the devil, he's not Satan. He's really a very compassionate and wise soul who's there to help humans curtail the evil in our planet.
I have to giggle because when I hear these when I hear these people, let's say tabloid-esque authors or tabloid-esque activists talking about Luciferian rituals within the Illuminati and Luciferian this and Luciferian that, I'm like, to me, sharing that type of information is more disinfo and it's more divisive to humanity, and it just seems to plays against the very unity that they're trying to create by releasing this type of what I call fear pornography. And Lucifer's the king of the fear porn headlines, if that makes any sense. I don't know if you've seen any of that yourself, Garnet.
I haven't, no.
Let me move on because I'm very interested about the visitors from the stars, and you as well were very lucky to connect with what was it? The Andromedan, a few beings from the Andromedan constellation.
Yes, and that was, and I viewed this through some scenes in the Akashic records, and I was viewing. Albert showed me scenes from my life as a Druid priest on the Salisbury Plain in England around 3000 BC. And what happened there was that as I'm watching this scene, my character there, the person I was in that life, had a dream one night, and the messenger there said, go to the plain, this part of the plain the next morning, and you'll be visited by somebody from the stars. So I went there, and then I noticed a spaceship sort of slowly floating down till it stopped about 3 feet above the ground. And then the door opened, and out came a human. He was a human in every respect except he was about 8 feet tall, and his name was Mogons, and he said that he came from the Andromeda constellation, a planet there, and his civilization was very advanced. They could travel between the stars, and he told me he came to enlist my help. He wanted me to organize the villagers to help him build a structure which he needed for navigation for his people, and it was basically a navigational beacon which would help ships in warp drive, find their way through wherever they're traveling through the galaxy. And so what he did was he unfurled a parchment with very detailed drawings of what he wanted it built, and this was basically what ended up being as Stonehenge. And so then he, based on these drawings, I organized the villagers to go to various quarries, in the surrounding area, and with the help of some very advanced tools. One was a laser cutting tool, which could cut through rock very easily with precision. The other one was an anti-gravity wand, which basically, if you aim it at a rock, it had the rock had no weight, so it could easily be moved. So with the help of these two tools and the plans that he gave us, we cut out from the quarry the various stones that now form Stonehenge, put them into place in accordance with his diagram, and when it was all done, and of course it was more complete than you see now, but when it was finished, he placed a power box in the center, basically turned it on, and that became a navigational beacon. And he chose the place because it was on what he called one of the galactic ley lines,
Mm.
So it was in a very important location, and it was designed deliberately, with the, to have some of the doors and windows coincide with the with rising sun and setting sun in the winter and the spring,
Yeah.
as you know, as people have already discovered that. And then away he went. And then a few hundred years later, he came back and retrieved the power box when it was no longer needed. And the whole time, the villagers thought that he was a god from the heavens, and they used the site for ceremonial purposes. They did not know its real purpose, and nobody to this day really does know it. But anyway, that was an encounter I had with visitors from the stars who actually helped the people in the Salisbury Plain build Stonehenge.
Wow. And it sounds very, very fascinating and very close to. Again, I had a woman on the show recently who was actually a gentleman who made some great discoveries at Stonehenge. And what you're describing sounds a little bit similar to what he's saying, that their discoveries suggest that perhaps the people that were living there were using that area as a place to send the souls back home. That it was a mirror map of, I guess it was the Andromedan galaxy, and that they would do the death ceremonies there, so the soul would know to go back home to the star system. So I'm like, there's a little bit of a connection there.
Yeah, there is. It's very eerie, in fact. But and I didn't know anything about that aspect of it, but it sounds like it kind of fits together a bit. So very
Yes.
interesting.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But anyway, very, very fascinating. Is there a chance that you're going to start working on a fourth book with your experiences with Albert? Or
Yes, there is. In fact, the manuscript for book 4 is almost finished, and it's a sequel to the first three, and it's more astral trips, adventures, meetings with souls, with my spirit guide Albert, and so it's almost finished, and hopefully it'll be published sometime in the next year.
wonderful, wonderful. And I know we've talked about the umbrella message to humanity that, let us again get over the division. Let's unite. Let's have compassion for the world, for the planet, for the animals, for each other. But is there any suggestion, either through your experience speaking with them or from them directly to the world, on how what steps can people do to do this? We can talk about being more compassionate, but some people have a very difficult time finding that compassion within them. What is maybe a step that people can take to start living in the way that's being suggested by Albert?
Well, I think they can start by trying to recall, even though they're not allowed to directly recall where they came from and who they are. If they realize that they're eternal souls, they came from the spirit side, which is our true home, where they're beings of energy. And on the spirit side, everyone loves everyone else unconditionally, and they understand that they're all connected to each other and to the source. And so if people here on earth realize, when you see other people walking down the street, looking at your coworkers and your neighbors, when you realize that those people are all souls having a human journey on earth just like you are, and if you understand that no two journeys are the same, they're all unique, everyone's had different experiences, different incarnations, different histories, and that you don't know what challenges they have faced or what they will face in their lives. When you put that all into the mix, then you can become more compassionate and understand that, okay, I shouldn't judge other people, because they're just struggling with their journey on earth the same way I am, and we're all in the same boat together, in other words. And so we should really try to pull together and help each other on our journeys so we can get the most out of our journeys. And so that's sort of, if you have that sort of frame of mind, then it's easier to love other people, to show some compassion, to show some understanding when people step on your toes, to not flare up in anger, to try to share more in terms of our wealth, and to the people who don't have as much as we do. And if you keep all these things in mind and really try to fully embrace love, then that's how we can sort of get over this hump and raise our vibration. So it's not an easy thing to do, Bernard, because we all have these flare-ups of negative emotions. But if we realize when they flare up that we need to stifle them and just think loving thoughts about the people who have crossed us, then I think we're making a lot of progress towards getting where we should go. And the other part of that is that once you realize what the problem is and where and how we need to fix it, it's also part of our job to spread that message to other people who aren't aware of the problem. And the more of us who are doing that, the greater the chance we have of pulling through this and making progress on the spiritual ladder.
Here, here. I thank you for that. That's a wonderful message for us to end today's broadcast on, and I hope everybody listened to that. We do have a responsibility. I don't believe that this all comes. It's not going to be a spontaneous evolution spiritually. I believe that we have to align ourselves with that energy that's available to us and that is being given to us by all of our spiritual helpers, our earth, and our higher selves. So thank you very, very much, Garnet, and I really appreciate having you on the show again today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bernard, and thank you for inviting me back on the show. And I'd be delighted to come on again when my 4th book is out.
Absolutely, that would be wonderful. Have a wonderful week, everyone. And next week we are going to be discussing how to use crystals and align with the living life force energy within.